Welcome to You Vote 2022, our live coverage of election results here on ACPM TV and radio. I'm Liliana Soto. Joining me for the next 30 minutes is here Steve Jess. Steve, hi, how are you?
Pretty good, Lily. How are you doing this evening?
So let's begin with a look at the numbers that we got, the preliminary numbers that we are seeing on the website.
Yeah, well, the Secretary of State is counting the votes, of course, for tonight, and the governor's race is one of several races that are confounding those who expected a lot of close races on this election night. In the governor's race, Katie Hobbs, the Democrat, now has about 756,000 votes counted to 578,000 for Kari Lake. That's about 56% of the vote for Katie Hobbs. She leads by 178,000 votes. Remember, though, it's important to say these are the early votes that came in before today. Votes that were cast today or ballots that were turned in today are going to be counted in hours and days to come. So in close races, they may even out and it may take a while to get the final result. In the U.S. Senate race, Mark Kelly is leading Republican challenger Blake Masters by actually about 250,000 votes. He is 239,000 votes ahead of Masters at this point. So Kelly appears headed for a term in his own right if that trend continues. He could get the full 6-year term after serving 2 years in the U.S. Senate. Staying with the federal races now, and I have to do, unfortunately, a little bit of scrolling on a computer I'm not familiar with, so I'm going to vamp for a few seconds while it loads on a new page. But in Congressional District 6, this is the one where Juan Ciscomani is running against Kirsten Engel for a seat where neither one of them is the incumbent. But in District 6, Engel has 56% of the vote. She's leading by about a 23,000 vote margin ahead of Juan Ciscomani. She has just under 98,000 votes as they're being counted right now. Ciscomani has about 43% of the vote, or 75,000 votes. It obviously could narrow as more votes are counted. In Congressional District 7, long-term, almost legendary Arizona Congressman Raul Grijalva appears headed for his 11th election to the U.S. House, his 11th term. He was first elected 20 years ago this year, and he has 70% of the vote against his Republican challenger, Luis Pozzolo. Looking at the numbers, Grijalva has about 66,000 votes against Pozzolo's 28,000 votes. So Raul Grijalva appears to be a shoo-in for another term in the U.S. House, where he chairs the Natural Resources Committee and has a lot of seniority and a lot of influence representing Southern Arizona.
And it's important to mention that this is a preliminary, information, all the votes. We have to wait until every vote is counted.
Yes.
But earlier this evening, Democratic candidate for governor Katie Hobbs spoke to her supporters in Phoenix. Here's what she had to say.
Hello, Arizona. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you all for your support throughout our entire campaign. I'm going to keep this short because I know we're expecting a long evening. We have seen the first results come in, and we are feeling good about what we're seeing. And that's because of all of the hard work that everyone in this room has put in. You all made calls, you knocked on doors, you talked to your friends, your family, your neighbors about what's at stake in this election. And most importantly, you all got out and voted. Now that the campaign is over and polls have closed, the county election officials are hard at work tabulating those votes, and they're going to be tabulating them for the next few days. I know that we're all eager to find out who won each of these incredibly important races, but we need to be patient and wait for every vote to be counted, because every single vote matters, and every single vote counts equally. Whether you voted by mail, dropped off your ballot in a secure drop box yesterday, or voted in person today. We know my opponent and her allies have been sowing doubt and confusion throughout this campaign, and it's unacceptable that they were spreading misinformation today while people were exercising their freedom to vote. I have every confidence that the counties administering this election conducted a free and fair election, and their results will be accurate. But they will take time, so prepare for a long evening and a few more days of counting. And for now, let's go enjoy the evening. Thank you.
So let's take a look at some more results. These are the propositions, the initiatives and referenda that were on the ballot. Proposition 128 is the first one. It's one of a set of propositions that was placed on the ballot by the state legislature, and it appears to be going down to defeat. It would essentially allow the state to it's hard to characterize, but override or at least, or perhaps rejigger, that's not an official term, some initiatives that have been passed by the voters if they are later reinterpreted by courts. Proposition 129, requiring initiatives to have a single subject, is about even. Proposition 128, I should say, is only getting 32% yes votes and 67% no votes, so it's a wide margin against it. Proposition 129, however, is much closer. It would require a single subject for initiatives to be placed on the ballot. 51% yes, 48% no out of the votes that have been counted, which are about 1.2 million of the votes across the state. So that could change quite a bit in the hours to come as more votes are counted. Proposition 130, which would expand some kinds of property tax exemptions, particularly affecting widows, veterans, and so forth, that's getting approved by about a 2-to-1 margin, so that seems to be a fairly secure proposition at this point. Proposition 131, relating to the executive department, that's a fancy way of saying creating a job of lieutenant governor for the state of Arizona. Voters seem to be approving that, but again, that one's also close. About 55% of the vote for Proposition 131, 677,000 votes for it, versus 45% or 570,000 votes against it. It would allow a little more continuity of government in case a governor is appointed to the cabinet, let's say, by a president. Instead of having a Secretary of State become governor, the lieutenant governor, the new lieutenant governor's role, would be the person who would step into the governor's role for the state of Arizona. Moving on to Proposition 211, relating to the disclosure of the original source of monies. Anyway, it's the dark money proposition. It would require disclosure of monies used to influence state elections. Voters seem to be inclined to approve that by a wide margin. We have nearly 1 million votes for it at this point, well, 974,000 versus about 300,000 votes against it. I can't see that one changing too much as more votes come in. It seems like Arizona voters have a sentiment against the idea of hiding the source of money used in campaign spending. Moving on to Proposition 308, this would allow in-state dreamers, that is DACA-eligible people who came to this country, whether legally or illegally, but may be here without documentation now as young adults. It would still allow them to take college classes in the state of Arizona with in-state tuition, which would save them and their families quite a bit of money. That's being approved at this point by a fairly narrow margin, not as close as some of the other propositions, but 55% of the voters are approving Proposition 308.
And it looks like we have, sorry for interrupting, we have now Kari Lake taking the stage, if I am hearing correctly.
Don't let them put doubt in you.
Let's take a look.
We have a movement. We have a movement and we know it. Did you feel it? Did you feel that movement? You know, I did a lot of praying to God. I've been praying to God every day, all day. And I said to him, you make this victory come whatever way you want. If it comes decisive on election day, then bring it to us that way. If we have to fight through the BS and the garbage, then we will fight through the BS and the garbage. But how do you get fair and free elections? You have to fight and win to make them fair and free. And we needed another stark reminder that we have incompetent people running the show in Arizona. Who is ready for a change? We had great patriots around this state show up today. It was so amazing. They showed up at the polls early this morning only to be told the election equipment didn't work. 2 minutes into voting, we had people being told, well, you're going to have to put your little ballot over here into another box. Guys, the fake media back there tried to tell us we were wrong for asking questions about our elections. Guess what? We are going to win this. We are going to win this. How many of you remember a couple months ago, August 2nd, the primary election? Wasn't that long ago? We came out and they said, oh, wow, they're 10 points down. The fake news was asking us to concede. And we kept climbing. We turned 15 points around and we won by 5 points. I just want you to know it's early. It's very early, and if we have to take this fight through, we will. If it takes hours or days, we will. But the great news is every single drop of election ballots that have come in the last 3 drops have shown us up 85%, 87%, 81%. I just want the propagandists back there to know, don't embarrass yourselves. Don't embarrass yourselves. Don't do it again. You've done it too many times. But what I want you to know is that the same movement we had last night at that rally in Prescott, the same movement we had at that rally in Scottsdale, the same movement we had at the rallies we've had before with record people is the same movement we have right this second. Nothing has changed. And I want you to know we are going to monitor the ballots. We got to work in this system that we have right now. And as they continue to come in and our numbers go up like they did last time, when we win, first line of action is to restore honesty to Arizona elections.
Well, there you have it. Now we're going to go with our reporter, Tony Paniagua, who is joining us from Pima County Elections Headquarters. Hello, Tony. How are you?
Hi, Liliana. Thank you for talking to us tonight. We are at the Pima County Election Center on Valencia and Country Club on the city's south side, where employees are getting ready to count tens of thousands of ballots. Tonight, we are told they are going to be handling about 72,000 election day votes. Those were votes that were turned in today. That compares to about 65,000 back in 2018. So in the last 4 years in this midterm election, there has been a gain of about 7,000 ballots. Once the machines are up and running, we're told they're going to be able to count about 30,000 ballots an hour. That is going to be, of course, very impressive. But keep in mind that these are all preliminary votes. Those are the votes that were turned in today. Pima County has approximately 673,000 registered voters. Some officials told us earlier that they think maybe about 280,000 people will actually cast the ballot during this midterm election. So it'll be hours, days, perhaps even weeks before we know who won some of these elections in Pima County. I can tell you this, there has been a lot of interest, of course. We've been hearing about this election for days, weeks, and months. We caught up with a voter who rushed into downtown today to the recorder's office to turn in his ballot because he was really interested in having his voice heard. This is what he had to say.
You know, I'm the father of 7 girls, so women's rights to me was very important. The Roe against Wade, overturning that decision, very important. You know, the economy is important. As a business owner, I understand that very, very much viscerally. So, and also just the opportunity, I think, to get back to electing, people that are interested in democracy, people that are interested in working together, and people that want to unite us. So that was on my mind as well.
So, of course, as you heard him there, lots of different interesting topics that he was fascinated and following all along. He said he just wanted to make sure that he cast his ballot. So that is the story from here, from the Pima County Election Center. Of course, the counting has just begun. It once again will take hours, days, perhaps even weeks before we have the final numbers. So whatever we see tonight, that's not really going to portray the whole story in this election cycle. That's the story from here. We'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Tony. Take some rest. I know you've been out all day. Now let's take a quick look at what's going on in Cochise County with our reporter Summer Hum. Summer, we understand we have some early numbers on the Sierra Vista mayor's race and why this could be historic. Tell us.
Good evening, Liliana, and thanks for having me. So this race could be historic because in Sierra Vista's 66-year history, we have not ever had a mayor of color. Currently, our Democratic candidate, Clea McCaw, who is black, is leading in the race as the third batch of votes has come in, and currently leads by Republican candidate Steve Conroy by more than 880 votes. However, Rachel Gray, also a Republican and former mayor of Pro Tem, is trailing Conroy by a little bit more than 200 votes.
Summer, and it's my understanding that there's also an important water vote. Can you please tell us what this is and what it will do?
Yeah, so currently right now there are two propositions on the ballots for members of Cochise County who live in the Wilcox and Douglas basins. And these would add extra regulations like metering wells that pump up to 35 gallons or more, as well as ensuring that there's a 100-year guarantee for the water supply. Now, this has generated a lot of discussion around water in the area, and supporters have said that this is long overdue, and they argue that the county needs this added protection to keep our water supply, and opponents have said that it would be strenuous for the local agricultural and livestock businesses in the county. Now, so far, for the Wilcox Basin, voters are trending towards voting no on that proposition. About 53.9% of the vote have voted no so far, but voters in Douglas are a little bit closer. About 51.8% of the vote so far is voting yes, but again, as Tony and our fellow colleagues have said, we won't have final results for some time, so that could very well change.
Thank you, Summer, for that report. And I'm hearing that now we have candidate Juan Cisco Money taking the stage. Let's take a look.
I'm also grateful to have our 6 kids here with us tonight. From day one of the campaign, they've been our greatest supporters, always encouraging me, crisscrossing the district with me in every single corner. And I can tell that their favorite part of the campaign was always the food at the events. Every single time. That's what they like to do. And we got to go to some amazing homes when many of you hosted events for us. And they always reminded me why I entered this race, why we did what we did, and why we fought as hard as we did, why we jumped in. And that is to protect and preserve the American dream for our children, our grandchildren, and every future generation.
And well, now we have our Paola Rodriguez. She's one of the Republican watch parties, and earlier this evening she spoke with, let's take a look.
So, how are you feeling about the Ciscomani race tonight?
I think Juan has worked very hard on this race. I know how difficult it is. I ran in this district a couple years ago, and this is even broader, more counties to cover. But I see him out multiple events every day, and I think he's really worked hard at speaking to as many folks as he can and making sure that he's hearing their concerns. I think he's done an incredible job.
Do you think, from your own experience, he's done the work to get that new vote, or to get those votes to win tonight?
I do. I think he's reached out to all different types of people, all different ages, demographic, even party. I think it's important that you speak to everybody when you're running for a seat like this to really represent the district, and I think he's done that work.
And from your own experience, how do you see this night moving forward as we're waiting for election results to come in?
Well, initial results, as you know, come out in about 20 minutes or so, around 8 p.m. We should get more results around 9 p.m. because this race is Pima County, Graham, Greenlee, Cochise County. I'm hoping we get results tonight for Juan's race. I know there's some issues right now related to the statewide races, specifically around Maricopa County and some of the issues that they've been facing, and hope that doesn't impact his race and that we know tonight. And I'm really wishing him the best. I think he's won this seat, and we'll see a little later tonight.
And do you see recent redistricting affecting how we see tonight's voting?
Well, I think the redistricting is interesting. The district is different than when I ran back in 2018 because, of course, it includes Graham and Greenlee County also, and a little different lines around Pima County. It really, I think, favors him as a Republican to win this seat. Will we see results tonight based on that redistricting? I'm not sure. I haven't heard any issues related to Graham, Greenlee counties. Cochise County had some different issues earlier in the election cycle. Seems like Pima County is going well tonight as far as I've heard. So we're hoping really to have results later this evening if we can.
Awesome. And is there anything else that you would like to add about the Juan Ciscomani race at this moment?
Anyone I'd like to...
Anything else you would like to add?
No, I just think Juan would do an incredible job representing all of our community, Democrat, Republican, Independent. As you're aware, this district is very split, a lot of different voices, very diverse, and I think he'll do a great job representing Southern Arizona when he wins his seat.
Thank you, Paola. And Steve, let's take a look at some of the top of the ticket numbers again. They seem to be pretty stable.
Yeah, an early tranche of election results was released a little bit after 8 o'clock tonight, and a few other counties have been added. Pima County came in with about 200,000 votes. Last time I checked, Apache County was the only one that hadn't had any votes report. At this point, it looks pretty good for Democrats, but that's at this point because things could change. Out of 6 statewide candidate races, 5 of them at this moment are being led by Democrats. The one exception being Republican State Treasurer Kimberly Yee, who appears headed toward re-election, but just barely at this point, leading only by about 7,000 votes statewide. But starting with the governor's race, Katie Hobbs, the Democrat, has 57% of the vote. Out of about 1.4 million votes counted so far, she leads by about 178,000. In the Secretary of State's race, one that a lot of people are watching because Mark Finchem has very strong opinions about elections and about whether Donald Trump should have won the 2020 election. So far, Mark Finchem has 41% of the vote versus Democrat Adrian Fontes is 59% of the vote. So Fontes appears headed for election at this point. Attorney General, again, the Democrat Chris Mays is in the lead over Abe Hamadeh. And in the Superintendent for Public Instruction race, Kathy Hoffman appears headed for an easy re-election over Tom Horn with 56% of the vote. But once again, the proviso, those votes could change as more Republican votes cast today on Election Day are counted in the coming hours. In the one race that is both federal and statewide, that's sorry, I'm doing things different order than the folks up in the tower probably want me to do them, but the U.S. Senate race between Mark Kelly and Blake Masters has Kelly in the lead with 57% of the vote and Masters with just under 40% of the vote. Kelly leading by 242,000 votes at this point. In any case, there is a lot of blue showing on these charts as these early votes come in. But we know that a lot of Republican votes that were cast today remain to be counted, and we expect a lot of these races to tighten and possibly even switch as we head toward morning and more votes were counted. I remember I think it was the Kelly versus McSally race. It took 3 or 4 days at least for final results to come in there. That could very well happen again.
And talking more about that blue, the Adrian Fontes, the Democratic candidate for Secretary of State, just spoke to his supporter in Phoenix. Let's take a listen.
First and foremost, I want to thank the voters of Arizona for sticking with us and sticking with democracy. This is your democracy. This belongs to the voters. And it doesn't matter what party you belong to or whether or not you have a party. In the United States of America, every voter counts, every vote will count, so long as we are victorious tonight. What do you say? Now, we've seen a few of the numbers coming out, and we feel pretty good about where we're at right now. We feel pretty good. That having been said, we will, with level heads and respect, we will respect the process. We will make sure every vote gets counted across this great state of Arizona. In the meantime, let us celebrate democracy. Let us celebrate the idea that we have moved in our civilization away from the divine right of kings and into the rule of law, where every single one of us matters. And let's also remember that regardless of the results, we have good people working right now all across Arizona to make sure that we preserve and protect democracy. So have a great time. We will be out later on tonight. Thank you, everyone, supporters, volunteers, staff, everybody here, all across the great state and all across the world. America's light will continue to shine, and we will preserve and protect the Republic. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
And just to wrap up really quick, any surprises that you saw with this race?
I expected things to be closer. Everybody says Arizona is a very evenly divided state in terms of Democrats, Republicans, and independents, and a lot of races in the polling right up until Election Day were just too close to call. Those are not the results we're seeing tonight.
Yeah, let me just ask my producer how long we have left for the show, because I have many more questions for you. Proposition 308, we were talking about the Dreamers. Any surprises there on any other propositions from what you've been reporting?
Well, 308 appears headed for approval, at least in the early vote count. That's the one that would allow DACA recipients or Dreamers to attend state universities at in-state tuition. It's clearly an issue that transcended party affiliation, with 55% of Arizona voters approving it. I don't think that's too surprising, because the idea that young people who are young adults and who are in this country without actually having crossed the border of their own volition illegally deserve a shot, deserve a chance. And I think that's something that a lot of Arizona voters seem to be agreeing with. I'm also surprised at the strong rejection of an initiative by the legislature that would give the legislature more power over state propositions that have been previously passed. Proposition 128 is going down badly, with only about 32% of the votes.
Well, we'll definitely have more to hear this whole week. Remember to stay with us. Our website, it is acpm.org, also on radio. Thank you for staying with us tonight.